Chapter 136, Scars, Antony's POV. Antony drew the comb through Hanyu's curling golden locks and tried not to let his hands tremble too much. It was just so good, and nothing he was enjoying so much could possibly be safe to indulge in. Hanyu's back was pressed against his knees as he leaned trustingly into him. His body was warm, solid, and real. It was so much more than Antony deserved. He'd cursed himself as soon as he blurted out the offer to fix his attendant's hair. It was such a transparent attempt to get close to Hanyu and touch him, he'd half expected the man to laugh in his face and half expected terrified, tearful obedience. Instead, Antony's hands and feet seemed to burn where Hanyu's lips had pressed them. But there was no point indulging in thoughts like that. It was enough that Hanyu had seemed pleased by the offer. Perhaps the man really was beginning to trust him again. "I'll deserve that trust," he vowed fiercely to himself. "If I can figure out how to do right by anybody, it will be him." There was only one thing wrong with the moment. Hanyu was being worryingly quiet. Did that mean that he actually was upset with Antony for taking liberties? Had he somehow learned to act over the course of one day? No, that was silly. That was absurd. Antony was acting unhinged. He needed to take some initiative in the conversation for once, that was all. He racked his brains for a topic. "Did your friend like his pencils?" he asked at last. "I fell asleep before I could hear about your visit." Hanyu straightened under his hand. Jen was delighted, and a little confused since he thought you didn't even know who he was. "Well, I don't, aside from your stories," Antony pointed out. "I wouldn't recognize him if I saw him." A horrible thought occurred. "Oh, fuck! You don't think he'd be offended if we saw each other and I didn't know him, do you?" Hanyu shook his head, which made Antony lose his grip on the strands of hair he'd been holding. "Sorry, but no, I don't think he'd mind. He knows that you only know him from listening to me." The young man's voice got strangely thick on those last words, and Antony started panicking again. "Shit! What did I do now? Why is it so upsetting that... Oh, of course! I've been such a rude and sensitive prick! As usual. I'm sorry I haven't made more of an effort to meet your friends," he said aloud, trying to sound humble instead of snapping. "We'll have to rectify that. Perhaps I could accompany you to the barracks next time for introductions." "That would be wonderful!" Hanyu cried. "They'd be so honored." "Just a visit." Now Antony was definitely grumbling, and he couldn't seem to stop. "Nothing to get excited about. I'm sure they were glad to see you, though." "They were." Suddenly, Hanyu's shoulders slumped a little. "And they were awfully worried about Asao." "But he's all right." Antony selected a scarlet ribbon and began weaving it through the young man's bright locks. "Didn't you tell them?" "Well, yes." Hanyu kept himself from shrugging this time, but Antony could still hear the dismissal in his voice. "But with his beauty ruined, they weren't sure what might happen to him now." "That's ridiculous," Antony snapped, only feeling better about his tone when he saw that Hanyu didn't flinch at the sound of it. "I would never throw him out for something like that. He was helping you. Anyhow, it'd be a little hypocritical for me to send someone away for being scarred and ugly." "You're not ugly," Hanyu protested loyally. Antony snorted. "Sure. Anyhow, you told them that, didn't you? You reassured them that Asao would always have a place with me?" "I said I was almost sure," the young man hedged. That hurt. Almost sure was better than nothing, but still, how could Hanyu believe that he would ever be so callous? "Be honest. You never would have thrown one of your attendants out for being scarred, but since Sana... If any of them had had their blood tainted, would you have even hesitated before Hanyu?" "Well, if nothing else, he always had the option to live with Thad," he said at last. rather than trying to defend his own non-existent honor. Hanyu giggled. That definitely didn't make them feel any better. Fuck. It was so good to hear him laugh. Antony felt dazed and stupid from the pleasure of the sound, and it took an embarrassingly long time for his mind to process the young man's words. When he finally caught up, however, he blinked down at Hanyu in confusion. What? He pushed. Why in the world would that not reassure them? Thad has a reputation back at the temple, the young man explained, chuckling again. There are lots of stories about him in his room of bones. People assume that he tortures and kills attendants for fun. That idea was so ludicrous, Antony didn't even know how to respond. He just gawked and waited for Hanyu to expound. Luckily, Hanyu did. I remember one story about an offering who didn't like to kneel. They said Lord Thaddeus put him in his place by cutting off his feet so he would always have to crawl. But that didn't really happen, did it? What the fuck? The very idea of Thaddeus, gentle, good-natured Thaddeus, who had worried about how his unfaithful attendant would feel if he left him alone too long, doing such a thing. Of course he didn't. Thad would never. That's good, Hanyu cheerfully interrupted his fumbling. I didn't think he had, but it's nice to hear for sure. What kind of sick asshole would even come up with a story like that? Antony demanded. It's no worse than that book you had me read, Hanyu said dismissively. Antony's righteous indignation fizzled to a chastened mutter. Well, I suppose not. I'm sorry for that. Theo didn't mean... Anyhow, that's just a story. That is a real person. Wasn't that general real? Yes, but... Antony bit down on his urge to argue and returned to his hairstyling. That's really what people think of him? Well, yes. Hanyu sounded far away. There were lots of stories like that. Lord Thaddeus was always supposed to be doing those sorts of things. They said he would cut off your ears if you didn't hear him addressing you, or cut off squares of skin if you missed a spot while cleaning, or castrate you if you weren't pleasing in bed. But it's not true! Gods, Thad would be crushed if he knew. You must have been scared to death when I sent you off to study alone with him. Oh, no! Hanyu started to shake his head, but Antony's squawk of protest halted the movement. Sorry, but I wasn't worried. I'd met him by then. And I saw Dido after everything that happened, and he was just fine, so I knew Thad couldn't be as dangerous as all that. Anyhow, the young man's voice dropped, softened. I knew no one would dare to hurt me. I'm yours. Hanyu kept saying that today. It almost seemed like some kind of spell, like he thought that if he said it enough times, it would make it truer. Antony wished he could think of a way to make his precious man feel as secure in his place here as he had before all this mess. But he supposed that it would simply take time. There, he said, pinning the last strands of hair in place. He'd woven Hanyu's hair and the scarlet ribbon into a crown atop his head, and he was rather pleased with the effect. He hoped his attendant would be too. Go take a look and see if it'll do. Hanyu bounded off to the mirror, then bounded back squealing. It's wonderful! Thank you, Antony! Antony had been hoping to earn Hanyu's praise, but now that it was being lavished on him, he felt awkward and wished he could hide from it. What was the matter with him? Yes, well, it's just a simple thing, he growled at his kneecaps. No trouble, not worth mentioning. Let's go. Getting to the infirmary involved clinging to Hanyu for support. Antony hated himself for taking advantage of the young man like this, and he hated himself even more for enjoying it so much. Hanyu's body was so broad and warm against him, and the man's arm encircled Antony so tenderly, as if his ancient, immortal body were something that needed to be protected. It was all he could do to keep from cuddling closer and breathing in Hanyu's scent. For his part, Hanyu's mood seemed to sober the closer they got to the infirmary. By the time Cloelia was calling out a greeting from her post in front of the door, the young man was so quiet that Antony might have feared he'd lost him if he hadn't had an arm around his rib cage. "Good to see you," Cloelia boomed, lifting her gaze from a little wooden puzzle she seemed to be fidgeting with. "Jules said you were coming. It's good to see you looking so well." "You too," Antony replied. "Are the others inside?" "They're playing cards." Cloelia's grin dimmed a little, and she glanced back at the door, then pocketed the puzzle and signed. "I played the first hand with them, but Asao was flinching every time I talked. I'm just too loud. I came back out here." "I'm sorry," Antony signed back, wishing they weren't leaving Hanyu out of the conversation, but unsure how else to keep the group inside from overhearing. "He'll get used to you. You're sweet to be so patient with him." Cloelia made a dismissive shooing gesture, then spoke aloud. "Well, come on in. They'll all be glad to see you too." Asao was in the chair again. They'd set up a little table in front of him, and Julia and Thad sat around it with their hands full of playing cards. Asao had let his own cards fall, and when Antony and Hanyu entered the room, he pressed his palms to the table and bent as deeply over them as he could manage. "Hello, Antony. Hello, Hanyu." Thad waved cheerfully at them. "Hello," Antony greeted. "Raise your head, Asao." Asao obeyed, but he kept his one eye trained on the table as Antony and Hanyu staggered in, and the young man lowered the vampire onto one of the available seats, then knelt at his feet. Antony would have ordered Hanyu to one of the other chairs if it hadn't felt so deeply, shamefully good to hang on to that bit of contact. "We're playing Reef Shark," Julia informed them. "Shall we deal you two in?" "No need," Antony said, then stopped, cursing himself. "Unless, Hanyu, did you want to play?" "I'd rather stay here, my lord." Hanyu sounded almost demure as he pressed closer to Antony's leg. "All right." Antony folded his hands in his lap so he wouldn't be tempted to put them on the young man. "Well, I mostly just came to check up on my attendant." Asao stilled at that. Was the tension in his shoulders a sign of fear, hope, disappointment? Hanyu wondered once if I could read minds. Damn, I wish he'd been right. "My lord is far more generous than his unworthy slave deserves," Asao murmured to the tabletop. "I am ashamed to have behaved so erratically in my lord's presence. Please punish me for my lack of control." 3 sentences out of this man's mouth, and Antony was already stumbling and wrong-footed again. He hated to admit it to himself, but it was such a relief that Thad planned to take Asao from him soon. As often as Antony misread and failed to understand demonstrated, uninhibited Hanyu, Asao was a puzzle he felt sure he would never be able to solve. No, Asao, gods, I wouldn't punish you for being upset," he fumbled, sure that every word out of his mouth was an awful mistake. "I'm just glad you're feeling better." Asao just bent his head lower. "My lord is too kind." "Yes, well..." Antony had a flash of inspiration. Maybe there was something he could offer this man after all, something to make him feel important before they parted ways. "Have you been giving any thought to your reward?" This time, when Asao's shoulders stiffened, there was no way to interpret his feelings as anything but wariness. "Forgive your stupid slave, my lord, but what do you mean?" Julia was looking sharply at Antony. Already, this seemed like a much worse idea than it had a moment ago. Still, he pressed on. "You showed great valor in defense of my other attendant." Damn, it was hard not to touch Hanyu, not to seek reassurance in his solid warmth. "I'll be honoring Lord Felix for his part in the rescue as well. When that happens, I'll ask you to name your reward. It would be best to have something planned." And that will be the perfect opportunity to put Hanyu and Thad's plan into action as well. We can make a ceremony of it, hand out boons and commendations. Raise Theo to second in command, summon the whole crew, let them point and laugh at their idiot captain who fell in love with a man so horrible he would... My lord honors me far beyond my worth, Esau said tightly. Simply to be my lord's most humble and obedient slave is more reward than an ugly, useless creature like myself could possibly deserve. Hanyu stiffened, Julia sighed, and Thad cried, Oh, Esau, no! Fuck! When will I learn that all my ideas are terrible and I should never act on them? Still, Antony tried for his calmest, most authoritative voice. Don't be ridiculous. As long as you're mine, I say what you deserve, don't I? Esau flinched. Yes, my lord. Forgive me. I did not mean... And I say you deserve a reward, Antony interrupted. As for the rest, for goodness sake, Esau, you're still less scarred than I am, and I'm not worthless and useless and all that, am I? No, my lord! Esau had gone pale under his bandages and eye patch. I never meant to imply. Of course my lord's scars do not. I would never. Please punish me as you see fit. Fuck. I just keep making things worse. I'm not punishing you. Any authority his tone had previously held was gone. And I'm not offended. I know you didn't mean anything. I'm the one who brought up my own scars. Antony cast an appealing look at Julia, who sighed again and stood. Didn't you have another reason for coming here today, Antony? She asked. Antony searched her face, bewildered, but when she darted a significant look at the door, then regarded him again with a strange softness in her eyes, he understood. Oh no, I couldn't possibly. It's too soon. I don't want. But it's time. It's past time. Putting it off won't help. I just need to get it over with. Yes. He hoped his voice didn't sound as heavy and defeated as he felt. I'd like to go visit my brother.